Hello and welcome. Find a comfortable position, gently close your eyes, and allow your body to begin to soften. Tonight, we journey to a quiet village nestled at the foot of hills that had long forgotten the color green. It is here that our story, Planting Hope, begins. In this quiet village, where the dust settled on everything and hope felt as distant as the clouds, lived an old man named Elia. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a story of seasons past and suns risen and set. He lived a simple life, with few possessions to his name. But he owned a treasure far greater than gold, a quiet, unshakable purpose. Every morning, while the village still slept under a blanket of stars and the world was hushed and still, Elia would rise. He would move with a slow, deliberate grace, his joints creaking like the old wooden door of his home. He would prepare a small meal, and then he would take up a worn burlap sack from beside the door. Inside this sack was the future, a collection of smooth brown acorns, each one holding the promise of a mighty oak tree. Carrying his bag of acorns and a sturdy walking stick, he would begin his daily pilgrimage. He'd walk away from the sleeping village, his footsteps the only sound in the pre-dawn stillness, heading towards the barren hills that loomed over them like silent, sleeping giants. These hills were stark and empty, stripped of life by years of wind and neglect. There were no trees, no shrubs, only pale, dusty earths and jagged rocks. The villagers, when they saw him, would often shake their heads. They were practical people, worn down by the harshness of their surroundings. They saw Elia's daily ritual not as an act of faith, but as a fool's errand. From their doorways they would call out, sometimes with pity, sometimes with a gentle mockery. "Elia, you old dreamer," a baker might say, wiping flour from his hands. "You are planting seeds of a forest you will never get to see. Why waste your final years on such a fruitless task?" Another might add, "Those tiny acorns will be washed away by the first rain or eaten by crows. You'll never see a single sprout." Elia would hear their words, carried on the breeze. He would pause, turn his head, and a soft, knowing smile would touch his lips. He never argued, never raised his voice. He would simply touch the brim of his old sun-faded hat and whisper more to himself and the wind than to anyone else, "Perhaps I will not see the forest. But one day a weary traveler will rest in its shade. A child might play beneath its branches. That is enough." And with that he would turn back to his path, his resolve as firm as the ancient stones beneath his feet. He believed in a tomorrow he might not be a part of, and this belief was the fuel that warmed him against the morning chill. He was not planting for himself. He was planting for a future he could only imagine, a legacy of green leaves and birdsong. He was planting hope. So he continued day after day. Arriving at the crest of a barren ridge, he would kneel. His old hands, gnarled and weathered like the roots of an ancient tree, would carefully dig a small hole in the dry, compacted earth. Into this small hollow he would place a single perfect acorn. He would cover it gently with soil, patting it down like a father tucking in a child. He would offer a silent blessing, a quiet wish for life and strength, before moving on to the next spot. One acorn, then another, then another. A slow, rhythmic dance of creation against a backdrop of desolation. Year after year, the seasons turned, and Elia's routine remained unchanged. He planted through the gentle spring rains that threatened to wash his tiny seeds away. He planted through the scorching summer suns that baked the earth until it was as hard as stone. He planted through the crisp autumn winds that tried to steal the acorns from his grasp. And he planted through the biting winter frosts that made the ground unyielding. His solitude was his companion. The hills became his sanctuary. He learned the language of the wind and the subtle shifts of the clouds. He had no wealth to speak of, no accolades or fame to his name. His cottage was humble, his meals simple. But as he walked those hills, a profound sense of purpose filled him, richer than any material possession. He wasn't just dropping seeds into the ground. He was stitching life back into the land, one tiny, hopeful thread at a time. His purpose was his anchor in the lonely expanse of the barren landscape. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a change began. A decade passed. A faint green fuzz started to appear on the distant slopes, a soft whisper of life where there had only been silence. Villagers, squinting into the morning sun, would sometimes pause and wonder if their eyes were deceiving them. Was that a hint of color on the hills? Another decade flowed by. The green fuzz thickened into a carpet of determined saplings. Elia, now slower, his back more bent, continued his work, planting among the very trees he had sown years before. Birds, long absent from the area, began to return. Their tentative chirps in the early morning were a symphony to Elia's ears. Small streams, which had run dry generations ago, started to trickle back to life. Their waters clear and cool, nourished by the new roots holding the soil in place. The village, which had been slowly shrinking as families left in search of lusher lands, began to stir with a newfound vitality. The air felt cleaner, fresher. The relentless dust storms of summer became less frequent, tamed by the growing forest. The return of water meant gardens could flourish once more. The village that had nearly vanished was being reborn, drawing its lifeblood from the greening hills above. Decades melted into a long green tapestry. Elia's hair, once the color of dark earth, was now as silver as the morning mist. His steps were short and shuffled, and his hands trembled slightly, but he still carried his bag of acorns. The hills were no longer barren. They were cloaked in a magnificent forest of young, sturdy oak trees. Sunlight dappled through a canopy of leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. Wildflowers bloomed in vibrant patches, and the air hummed with the buzz of bees and the rich, earthy scent of life. Travelers who had once hurried through this desolate land now began to stop, their journeys paused by the breathtaking sight. They would dismount their horses or stop their carts, staring in awe at the lush green paradise that had risen from the dust. It was an oasis, a miracle of nature, who created this. They would ask the villagers, their voices filled with wonder, what king or wealthy lord commanded this forest to grow here? And the villagers, many of whom were the children and grandchildren of those who had once mocked the old man, would look up at the hills with a mixture of reverence and pride. They would answer softly, their voices carrying a lesson learned through a lifetime of observation. It wasn't a king, they would say. It was an old man named Elia, an old man who believed in tomorrow. Elia lived long enough to sit in the shade of the first trees he had planted. He never saw the forest in its full, towering glory, but he saw its beginning. He felt its cool breath on his skin and heard the music of its life. He had planted seeds of hope, and they had grown into a legacy of life, purpose, and patience. His story became a gentle reminder, whispered on the wind through the leaves of the great oak forest, that one small, persistent act of love can transform the world. And now, as you rest here, imagine yourself lying in the soft, cool grass under those very trees. Feel the gentle breeze, carrying the scent of oak and damp earth. Listen to the rustle of the leaves, a soothing lullaby created by one man's unwavering hope. Let this peace fill you and carry you into a deep and restful sleep. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe for more peaceful stories. Sleep well.